know he's in love with Kyle Pitts, like Broadus is, like Kavanaugh is, like the entire world is. And just to recap, my points against drafting him had nothing to do. I wasn't going to take the easy way out and say he's not even going to be on the board. He's not going to be on the board when you're there. You don't need him. You can score 32 points a game without him. You're not going to score 38 points a game with him. You are completely empty on the defensive side of the ball. The great tight ends in the league right now, and many throughout the history of the league, were not taken in the first round. And I need to unless he's going to be Tony Gonzalez, unless you're telling me he's going to be Gronk, then I got to go away from something that's a luxury for me when I have CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and Amari Cooper. Dalton Miller, what do you think of all my amazing points?
Listen, I got to be honest with you. Most of your points are very, very good overall, especially when it comes to drafting tight ends. Like, I'm not a guy who really likes to draft tight ends in the first round for a lot of the reasons that you said. It's because, historically we have not seen tight ends that are drafted very high end up being super productive at the NFL level. But more than anything, it's a really difficult transition from the college to the NFL level being a tight end in the traditional sense, especially. Here's the thing that makes Kyle Pitts different. You could literally put him on the outside in Michael Gallup's spot at the X receiver position, and he would be maybe not as productive as Michael Gallup in year one, but by year 2 or 3, we are talking about a guy who could legitimately be a 12 to 1,400 yard receiver. I mean, even a guy who could outproduce CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. Like that that's how special this kid could be.
Are you thinking of him more as a wideout than a tight end, or
that's the thing? That's the thing about him is he is the best of both worlds. So the way that I would do it most likely is use him as a big slot, use him as an outside receiver in 11 personnel, and then in 11 personnel, but in 12 personnel, if you want to bring him down, you can do that as well, and he can play in line. He's not just one of those big guys that can't block either. He's not Kittle as a blocker, but he's a good positional blocker. He plays his ass off in line as well. So I do really like him in both of those situations. And with that, with the 12 personnel, with the heavier personnel, you get him in against safeties instead of corners. And it doesn't really matter because when you see him play against Patrick Surtain or J.C. Horn or any of those guys, he dominates there too.
Yeah, and for me, it's and I don't. If they didn't draft Pitts, if they traded down, that'd be my preference anyway.
And that's my number one preference. Yeah. I want to trade down and gather as many picks as possible.
Right. But and this is brought up on the fan text. I think it's a really good point. One of the things you got to look at with drafting is the risk reward of how big of a gap is there within the league between average at the position and elite at the position. That's why the running back position's gotten so devalued, because the average running back gets about 12 inches of carry less than the most elite, which makes the elite guy not worth it at all. But is the average tight end versus the elite tight end, how big is that gap?
Massive. And that's why I think he's so valuable, because you have your Kelce's, you have your Kittles, you have, Gronk in his prime, obviously. How many, legitimately, and you have Darren Waller now, how many legitimately great tight ends are out there in the NFL? Just look at your fantasy football drafts. After the first 4 or 5, there's nothing. And that's a guy that Kyle Pitts can be one of those 4 or 5 guys. And so that's why he, in my opinion, is so valuable, because there aren't that many guys, and he is a legitimate mismatch against anybody that lines up against him. Now,
who do you compare him to? Who's his comp?
I mean, Tony. Legitimately, just an absolute mismatch, and no matter where you put him.
So he's the best tight end you've ever watched.
Yeah, no, it's not even close. And the difference between him and a guy like T.J. Hawkinson is that big 265-pound inline tight end who can run crossers, and he's athletic, and he can make those plays. Noah Fant, the other Iowa tight end, was a little bit more that wide receiver, but he wasn't as physically gifted as Kyle Pitts, and so I didn't like him nearly as much. Kyle Pitts is a different animal, and Landon McCool, who does the Locked On Cowboys podcast, said it on Twitter the other day. Kyle Pitts is what you would expect Randy Moss's son to look like at tight end. And I thought that was the best comp for him, honestly.